Welcome to View from the Pulpit, where we discuss and explore the place and function of preaching in the church. My name is Ben Smith, and I'm a pastor in rural South Georgia, and I've been preaching for a little over 20 years. This podcast is about preaching, but not a podcast just for preachers. On the View from the Pulpit podcast, I'll have conversations about the role of preaching, the labor of preparing to preach, the effectiveness of how one preaches, and so much more. And I'm hoping to help the church recover an understanding and an appreciation for what preaching is and how God has ordained its role in the church. Now, before we get started, let me encourage you to subscribe to the show, leave a review, share with a friend, do all the things that help spread the word and promote the podcast for us. Now, today, my guest is Dr. Mac Brunson. Dr. Brunson is the senior pastor at Valleydale Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Prior to coming to Valleydale, he served as senior pastor of First Baptist Church in Jacksonville. And prior to that, he served as senior pastor at First Baptist Church, Dallas, Texas. He's also pastored churches in South Carolina, Virginia, and North Carolina. He has his undergraduate from Furman University, and then his MDiv from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth, Texas, followed by a DMin from there and a PhD from Southwestern as well. He is an author of lots of books, including God is for You, Learning to Trust God's Wisdom Through Life's Crisis, Paralyzed by Fear or Empowered by Hope, a fresh look at Psalm 23, and the new guidebook for pastors. He and his wife, Debbie, have 3 adult children and 16 grandchildren. Your kids have done well for you, Dr. Brunson. So
They think it's a competition, I believe.
Well, that's a good competition to have. Well, Dr. Brunson, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate your time today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking me, Ben.
Well, brother, it's a real honor for me. You are you're well known in our circles as a fine and excellent preacher, and of course, you've pastored some of the the larger churches in our denomination. And so I want to pick your brain today and just talk about preaching and those sort of things and glean what we can from you.
Sure, I'm glad to.
So you've pastored Valleydale, and prior to that, first Jacksonville and then first Dallas. Those are large. All 3 of those are large churches. And when you pastor a large church, there are some resources available to you that the guy that's pastoring a church of 100 or less doesn't have. And yet the things that are eternal and required of every church are replicable no matter what size you're in and what size church you're in. So talk with me about some of the things that you're doing at Valleydale that you would encourage every pastor to do. And I'm thinking like beyond just the preaching of the word, but like listening notes and those sort of things. What things do you think are very helpful no matter what size church you're in?
Well, my first church, my first Sunday, I had 12. So I started out in a very small country, rural church. It was at the end of a paved road, by the way. I mean, out in the woods. And,
you couldn't see it from the main road?
You could, well, no, that wasn't a main road. That was an old farm road.
Right.
It was paved, but the pavement ended there at the church.
I know that
so
church.
I started out. Yeah. So I started out with 12 and, it's interesting where the Lord has taken me in ministry, but I find the same thing applied there that applied in mega churches. And the same things that I was doing in mega churches, I was doing in that church. It eventually grew to, we couldn't put more than 100 in the church. I mean, that was packed. And the choir loft was full, and then the church was full at 100 people. But God blessed, in the 16 months I was there, we saw 55 baptisms in those 16 months. In a church, they hadn't baptized anybody in over 5 years. I don't know how long it had been since their last baptism, but at least 5 years. So that's the same thing. I worked on sermons. I worked on checking on the people, pastoring the people, and going through the community and sharing the gospel. I do the same thing now. That's what I do. And that role hasn't changed. I'm a pastor at heart. I believe that the great call of God on my life is to preach. And if you don't feed your people, you shouldn't expect them to grow. I had 3 kids and all these grandkids now. And if I don't feed them, they're not going to grow.
Right.
But as long as I feed them and keep them healthy, they'll grow. So that's simple. You don't have to really go much beyond that. And I think the Lord blesses that. I think he honors that.
So feeding your people well means that you have to spend some significant time in your study. Preparing to preach. How have you managed your time? From a church of 12 actually may be more demanding upon your time than a church of 1,200, just because of
I promise you it can be.
Right. So how have you managed your time?
I learned this early on, and this is what I'm an early morning person. So I get up early in the morning, usually around 4:30 now. Now, I've not always done that, but I study more today than I ever have before. But to go back to the days when I had little children and I was in my first church out of seminary, and you're the only person on staff except for a secretary. I did have a secretary there. And I would just try to study in the mornings. I'd try to give my morning to the study. And I asked the people that when I got there, I said, let me give my mornings to the study. And then in the afternoons and some evenings, I will visit. I will do what I can do. And unless it is a real emergency, just let me have the mornings. And they were very agreeable to do that. People aren't disagreeable to that. They know you've got to do your work. But now if somebody, died naturally, or if somebody was rushed to the hospital, I would slip out and go to the house or go run down to the hospital and check on them. But, your studies spill into the evening sometimes. Mine do, even now. A lot of evenings, we don't even turn on the TV. Debbie will say, let's have a reading night tonight. So we'll both just sit in the den and we'll read for the evening. And I study. I'm studying all the time. And like I said, now I study more, even though I only preach one new sermon a week. That's Sunday morning. I don't preach Sunday night and I don't do Wednesday nights. Now in my past, I have Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. For years I did that. But I'm studying more now on just one sermon. It's taken me as much time as it used to do 3.
So why do you think you're studying more now than you did in previous years?
I'm studying, I think, at a little deeper level. At least I hope my preaching, if you've been preaching for 40-something years and your preaching hasn't deepened and hasn't gotten better, you're doing something major wrong somewhere. Mm-hmm. So, and I love to study. In Dallas, I had some assistants in my office. In Jacksonville, not so much, but the fact of the matter is I don't want to go to meetings. I want to do my own preparation.
Yes.
Now, most guys today in mega churches have people that do the preparation for them, and they're attending all these other things. Well, the opposite is true of me. I'll prepare and let somebody else go to the meetings.
Yes. Yeah. Because I don't know. I've never had anybody prepare for me, but it would seem to me like it wouldn't be my own if I didn't. It wouldn't be in my mind and heart.
I don't know how they do that.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not knocking them, but that's just not me. Yeah. I could list you off a number of guys, and which I'm not going to do, who are people use their names every day, and they have a lot of guys on staff or people on staff that do the preparation for them, that do exposition for them, that find the illustrations for them, that kind of thing. Well, man, that's the joy of it for me, is to get in there and just dig in the Word.
Yeah.
that I want to do, and I'm doing more of it now because I just love it.
So walk me through your process of preparing to preach. So Monday morning, you're starting your week with a passage and planning to preach that Sunday. Walk me through day by day how you get to Sunday.
Well, at Valleydale, it's the first time I've had a church that did not have Sunday night services. So after all those years of preaching Sunday nights, now I have Sunday afternoons off and Sunday night. So I generally am sitting with a stack of books and a legal pad and a pencil or a pen and a highlighter, and I start looking at the next passage that I'm going to preach. I get up Monday morning, and I have a number of meetings that you just have to go through in pastoring a church. So I get not a whole lot of study done on Monday, but I've started into it on Sunday nights, and I'll get to some of it on Monday. And then Tuesday, I'm into it earnestly. And then Wednesday, I'm into it earnestly. And Thursday, I'm generally finishing it up. So I take Friday and Saturday at that time, and I'm either going back over it or I am reading material ahead. And then just reading some other stuff that I don't get the chance to read during the other part of the week. So that's kind of my schedule. It's a lot of study, a lot of reading, a lot of preparation. And I often start it on Sunday nights.
Now, you're preaching through books there at Valleydale, aren't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So do you sit down before you start? Are you preaching through John right now? Is that right? Or Mark?
No, I'm doing really kind of a combination of three things. I'd been in the Old Testament in Joseph's life for a year, at least a year. And I left that and I said, now I need to get to the New Testament. I need to preach on Jesus some. So not like I didn't. You always preach the cross. I don't care what you're doing.
Right.
Whether you're Old Testament, New Testament, you're always preaching the cross. But I'm doing the great I ams. Then I'm going to do the 7 I wills. And then I'm going to look at the confrontational Jesus. The confrontations that he had, the Jesus we don't normally think about.
Excellent. So how far out have you planned, if you're preaching through a book, do you outline or break the passages down that you're going to preach all the way through,
No.
or do you work it as you go?
Yeah, I work it as I go.
Okay.
I just work it as I go. I asked I was at dinner with Dr. Swindoll one night, and I asked him, I said, do you work 3 and 4 weeks ahead? And he says, I have done it, but he said, I don't like to do that. And I found that to be interesting. He says, I really work this week on what I'm going to preach this Sunday. Well, that's what I do. Because I have gotten ahead. I've worked 2 or 3 weeks ahead before, and I would just kind of lose it. What was the real impetus? What was I really doing? And I have to go back and kind of go through the process again to get that same passion. So I'd rather serve bread hot out the oven.
Yeah.
So what I'm preaching this Easter Sunday morning is a passage I preached before, but it's totally different going back through it, looking at a different emphasis and writing that sermon right now. I'm in the middle of writing it.
So you started ministry in the early 80s? Is that right?
Yeah, I started. My first church was was before seminary, really in the late 70s.
Late 70s.
It was that small country church. I'd graduated from Furman University, and before I went to seminary, I was preaching in that country church. At least I did for 16 months. And then I went to Southwestern in 81. And, I didn't pastor a church when I was in seminary because I had so many I don't know how it worked this way, but I had so many people asking me to come and preach for them that I just would travel and do that. So the longer I was at seminary, the more invitations I got. And then when I graduated, I went to my first church, full-time church in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Had you been exposed to expository preaching before seminary?
The only person that I heard do it, it's an interesting question. No, my pastors were not expository. They were more topical than anything else. And the first person I ever heard preach an expository sermon was Dr. Mark Courts at Calvary Baptist Church in Winston-Salem. He was my sister and my brother-in-law's pastor. And Dr. Courts became a very, very dear, close friend of mine when I was pastoring in North Carolina. And miss him to this day, love the guy. He was a great expositor. But going to college on Sunday nights, I'd stay at home and go to church on Sunday nights and get in the car, and my best friend and I were in school together. And going back to college on Sunday nights, I'd listen to WMUU. I think WMMU. Yeah, I think that's it. It was Bob Jones' station. And I'd listen to Bob Jones Jr., and I'd listen to, different ones that were on there. And they happened to be, people don't think about this, but they taught exposition at Bob Jones. Now, I'm going to Furman,
right,
which they thought all of us at Furman were headed for hell. And they may not have been wrong in a lot of instances, but, I just picked up, they're handling the Word of God in a way that is very different than what I've heard. But I didn't understand that until I got to Southwestern. I had Joel Gregory for preaching, and I began to put the pieces together.
So did you learn to preach expositional sermons at Southwestern?
Yeah, I think so. Because everything I had done prior to that, before seminary, was all topical stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I had no way. I'd get a Bailey Smith evangelistic, book on sermons, and I'd read that, and I'd read, the only other thing that I had were a couple of Barclay commentaries, and that was it. That was basically it.
Yeah.
I tell you, though, that the associational missionary there gave me one piece of advice that has made a huge difference. He said, whatever you do, he said, you sit down and you write out in complete form your sermon. And I started doing that then, and I've never veered from it. I write, I type, I don't pass it off to a secretary. I type all my sermons myself, and I do a full and complete manuscript for every sermon. So there were weeks I was doing a full manuscript for Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night.
That's tremendous
Plus,
amount of work.
Yeah, you better believe it. Plus doing all the pastoral ministry, and I've got every single one of those sermons in notebooks, in cabinets here at Valleydale.
Those are like your life treasure, aren't they?
Yeah, there's some of them are 2.5 pages long, double space, some are 3. Now I generally have about 7 pages, double space, but I write out completely my illustrations. And then I when I was at Dallas, I learned there that I needed to start footnoting those things. So I began to footnote all of my illustrations. And a lot of times, maybe some major things that I'd picked out in the text, I would put a footnote down. Because I had people that would call, and I still do, that call and want to know, well, where's that? I did it basically because I had a guy one time who wrote me. I had given the illustration of Harvard's original logo, which was a picture of the Bible up, sitting on top of 3 books that had been turned upside down. And I said, here's writing, reading, and arithmetic. Here are the sciences here, the academics here. And I said, on top of them all is the Word of God. Well, this guy wrote me, and he said, hey, that's not right. He said, I listened to you, and he said, that's not right. That's da-da-da-da-da. So I sent him back the article. I remembered where I got the article from. I sent it back to him, And I said, listen, I have a Harvard graduate doctor that sits behind me in the orchestra and a Harvard lawyer that sits in front of me. I said, I can't afford not to be accurate if I'm given that kind of illustration.
Right.
Well, lo and behold, the guy wrote me an apology back. He said, well, you know what? You're exactly right. So I started footnoting things those years ago. That's probably more than you want to know.
No, I appreciate it. But I will tell you, I footnote as well. But it continues to this day to be a bit of an anxiety issue for me. So when I was in college, they used the Turabian style manual. And
Lord.
Turabian is a torturous style manual. And
listen, do your people let you cuss like that?
and the way they would grade is they would give you a grade on the paper. So if let's just say you made a B, and then they would -1 for every grammatical error. Well, I was never one that could get my grammar correct, but there was one paper in particular. I don't know how many footnotes I had, but every single one of them, a comma was in the wrong spot. It was before or after. And it was -1. And I think when they got to like just 1 point above an F, they stopped counting. And so even today, nobody's grading me on my footnotes and my sermon notes, but I'm like, hey, I don't think the comma's correct or the word is correct.
Well, I tell you, in my D-Min class, in my defense, when I went before the professors for my D-Min, after that whole thing, they handed me my paperback and said, you've got to redo this whole thing. And by the way, your footnotes are 1.5 inches off. So, they approved it, but it had to be redone.
I feel better.
When I got to the PhD, I had Dr. Allen, and let me tell you something. He is the expert on Cape Turabian. And he'll notice if you've got a colon where a semicolon is supposed to be, or a comma is here or there or not there. And so when I went through my PhD defense, by that time I had pretty well memorized Turabian. But of course, she's so imperfect. She comes out with these new editions all the time.
Right.
So
So you know the anxiety then.
Oh, my stars. Yes.
So
if you've done seminary work and you're not acquainted with Turabian, you need to get out that seminary and go to a real one.
Yes. I did appreciate my undergraduate studies for nothing else. I knew what Turabian was. I was exposed to it, and it was not I didn't have a learning curve when I got to seminary but it's awful. It's just awful.
Oh, my stars, yeah.
So do you go to the pulpit with your manuscript, or do you do something else in the pulpit?
I do. I have a manuscript, and I just know it so well, that I rarely ever refer to it.
Yeah, because I've watched you preach, and I wouldn't have known you had a manuscript.
Yeah, well, that's what everybody says. I do, and especially if I've got a big quote that I want to make. But most everything else I just memorize. And, honestly, if you do expositional preaching, the text is your outline. You've got your outline there in the text.
Right.
So it's there, you don't have to worry about it. It's there in the text. That's what you're preaching. And that, to me, is the most important thing. I'm going to London in late September and the 1st of October. Late September, the 1st of October, and I'm going to be teaching some pastors in North London, where we're planning our second church there, in the area where all of these Turkish Muslim immigrants are. I'm going to do some teaching there on preaching. And the first thing that I will say to them is this: when you get up to preach, you be sure that the first thing you've done is that you've taken a text. You get a text of Scripture. So let's just begin right there.
Amen. If you start there, you have gotten halfway to where you need to be.
Yeah, and it's exactly what Paul has said to Timothy, preach the word.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't say preach current events. He doesn't say preach, whatever AI worked up for you. It does, and people do that. Or don't preach, some sermon you got from here, there, yonder. Preach the word. Go to the word and do the work.
Mm-hmm. And it is hard work. To work.
It's hard work, but it is so incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. So you are well known for being a voracious reader and a history buff nut. I'm not sure where to put that one.
Yeah, nut would probably be more right.
Which I love about you. And then as a result of that, you use a lot of historical illustrations in your preaching. Yeah. And so you're also known because of that, of just an excellent illustrator of your sermons. What have you learned over the years that has been, what have you learned about illustrations? So some things that you think are helpful about them, and what are some things you've learned over the years that are not so helpful about them?
Well, a couple of things that are not helpful is when you use a great story in the wrong place. A lot of guys just get a hold of a good story during the course of the week and they force it into the sermon because they just love the story and it's good. And they think, oh gosh, this just is so good. I want to use it. And they're not willing to hold it and sit on it and use it in an appropriate place, in an appropriate message. So I think that's one thing, is that guys just don't know how to use them or when to use them or where to use them. The other thing is a lot of guys, they just get stories from other guys instead of going and finding something current. Along with that is a lot of people will just use, and I read a guy this week who is a internationally known pastor, and he used a sermon illustration like this. Well, there were three guys who went and they were hiking up this mount, kind of deal. Well, that is so pale and banal and hackneyed and lifeless and bloodless. You've got to add the color to it. Yeah. You've got to say Ben Jones and John Dooley were hiking up Yosemite's treacherous path to, whatever. You've got to add some depth and some color and some, the thing of there were three guys who did this or that or that, you've got to get away from that. So we are people who communicate with words. So give them color, give them depth, give them perception, give them all the things that a flat panel 80-inch television is, instead of that old portable black and white that came out in the late 60s.
Right. Do you struggle with the historical details is what I love, but do you struggle with wanting or actually telling more of the story than what is helpful for the sermon?
Yeah, you do that. Debbie was speaking the other day at a ladies' conference, and she was asking me about a story, and she said, I believe I've got too much here. Look at this story and tell me what I could do to make it briefer, more to make it shorter. So I did that. I kind of went through it and I said, hey, look, this is all unnecessary right here. When you get a great story and you want to tell it, sometimes you tell too much of it. Yeah. You can go into too much detail.
That's why you love this. That's why the story's good, because you love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that'll just wear people out. So it's thinking through it and knowing it. I'll tell you something. I was with Dr. Hawkins and Dr. Graham one time I don't know why the three of us were at this funeral and somebody else was doing it. Somebody else was doing the funeral, but I remember it, and the guy had to read a story. And Dr. Graham leaned over and he said, now, if I were doing that, I'd have memorized it. And I thought, exactly, that's exactly right. Know your stories, and be sure you've done your homework behind it. Because I had a guy one time that called and got some illustration for me. I just gave him some illustrations, and he had somebody catch him on it. And he called me and he said, "Hey, man," he said, did you get this right? Did you get the run? It was
So wait, he got the illustration from you, and then he wanted to ask if you were correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what he did was he got up, and he did not understand that Lee surrendered to Grant at a place called Appomattox Courthouse, not in Appomattox Courthouse. He surrendered in the McLean house that was at the little town called Appomattox Courthouse.
And your Civil War buffs
he says they
know
surrendered in the courthouse. Yeah. And I said, no, dummy, you need to read the thing. Don't just you need to know what you're talking about.
Right.
So,
do you have a system of how you collect, like you're reading a book and you find you come across something you think will be helpful? Do you have a way of collecting that or tagging that for future use?
Now, I'll tell you, because I'm asked that question a lot, and all I can tell you is I see it in my head. That's the only collection I've got. I don't have a file. I don't keep a file. I started out doing that, and I had like 300 folders, and they were all divided up, and I never used anything out of them, so I eventually needed the file space, and I just threw all that away. It's either I just currently go looking for it, or I remember something that I've read, and I just go get the book and find it.
So I think I got this, I'm not sure, but I think I got this from Charles Stanley. I think I heard him tell this story one time. But if it is him, he puts little Post-it notes in the book. And so I just picked that up, and if I read a book and then I tell a story from the book 2 or 3 times, I just know that's a story that I like. And so I just usually write like a little blurb, like Lee surrenders, and I'll write the page number, and I stick it in the book, because I can usually remember the book that it came from, but I don't want to spend half a day looking through all the pages and finding it.
Yeah, sometimes I do the same thing. I just kind of stumbled on that myself. I never heard anybody say it, but sometimes I'll get those little markers that you can pick up in Staples or Office Depot or somewhere like that, and I'll put some of those in it. I always read with a highlighter and a pencil, and I'll note things, and I can go back and pretty well, grab it and
right. Yeah, but I have had those stories where I know it's in there and it's really good, and you spend half a day flipping pages, and
you'll do it easily.
Yeah, particularly,
and it makes you mad.
Yeah,
and you're determined. I'm mad. I know read it in here. And I am going to find that thing just to spike this book.
Google Books used to have a thing where they scanned books and you could search within a book.
Yeah.
But I don't think they do that anymore. But that was helpful when I needed to find the page number.
You know how I started doing that? Is that Dr. Gregory took me to the library one day, and he pulled out a reader's periodical guide. And he looked up the word, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a word out there, forgiveness. And he started going down, turn over here to forgiveness. And it gave a record of every magazine that had the word forgiveness in it. It gave the magazine, the time, the date, all of that, which edition it was. And it gave all of those that did that. That's how I used to look them up. In fact, that's how I started looking up his illustrations for him when he was preaching at Dallas on Sunday nights. He would call me in on Monday and say, "Hey, I'm going to preach on this." And he said, "I need some illustrations on forgiveness. I need some illustrations on, whatever."
Right.
And I would go and get them and bring them back to him on Thursday and just kind of go through the illustrations for him. And then he would pick out what he wanted to use for that Sunday night. He was preaching in 84 Yeah, I think it was 84. The Sunday nights in 83 or 84 at First Dallas. So, and that's how you had to do it. That was before you could just get on a computer and, it was there.
Yeah. You had to do the actual legwork of going and find a paper that had it on it.
You know where I find a lot of illustrations? Every morning about 4:30, I'm up and I'm in the recliner in the kitchen. I'm doing my morning devotion, and then I get on and I look at a couple of things. And one of the things I look at is the UK Daily Mail, the newspaper,
right,
or the London Times, and I usually look at both of them, and then I look at the Jerusalem Post. And so I just kind of go through a number of newspapers, and you got the illustrations in a week. You can find more illustrations than you can use.
Yeah.
In just about every area.
Yeah. My sense of it is that is a struggle for many men. The expositional work, there's some good training in that. And for me, illustrations are secondary certainly to the expositional work, but they're not important. They are important. And and so a lot of times
they are. It's a visual into the point that you're making.
Yeah.
That's why you want to be sure. Now here's a step that most guys neglect. They don't know how to craft the illustration into the point. And there is a crafting to it. There's an art to it, to where you use that illustration and it becomes a tremendous picture of what you're saying. And it helps. It does two things. It gives relief to the hearers, to the congregation. That is a mental relief from heavy exposition. And then it gives them a window through which they can look and see the point that you're making. Mm. I'll give you a good one. I won't take the time to do the whole thing, but I was just in Venice and I was thinking about, I want to take my group by the home of Marco Polo. But I never got the chance to get them there, but I've been to Venice about 5 times, I think 6 times. And every other time I've been down by the home of Marco Polo. And I've just stood out there and I've thought about the tremendous life of Marco Polo, who went to China and was there in the court of Kublai Khan. And, the interesting thing about that is all that he saw. He saw great cities in China that made London look like a little village. The palace of the Khans dwarfed the great castles of Europe. And they even had a dining room that would seat 6,000 at dinner at one time. And they all ate off of gold plates. Mm. Now, Polo saw all of this. He saw the first paper money there. He saw the explosion of gunpowder there for the first time. And believe it or not, he was one of the first Europeans to ever eat pasta from China, an Italian. Now, we always associate pasta with the Italians.
Right.
He brought it back from China. And, of course, all of the silk and all of that. Well, he served in Kublai Khan's court for 17 years. He came home and he began to relate all of these stories and tell these stories. And he had all of these things that he brought back from China. And the people didn't believe him. They just didn't believe him.
Too fantastic.
And so, too fantastic, too magnificent. You're making all of this up. It's too big to be real.
Right.
And so they hounded him for the rest of his life. Well, here's the interesting thing, is that he is dying. And people begin to crowd in and around his bed and around him, and they're constantly asking him, did you tell us the truth? Did you tell us the truth? Is everything that you said, you're about to die, were you honest with us? His last words were basically these: I've not told you half of what I saw. Mm. Now, I'm preaching on Lazarus Sunday. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to know, what did you see? What did you see? What did tell us how great it was? Tell us how wonderful it was, magnificent, all of that. Tell us. We never have a recorded word from Lazarus about what he saw.
Yeah. Other than they wanted to kill him for telling it.
But we do have a word. They never would believe. They never believed him to begin with. They, Marco Polo, they just didn't believe him.
Right.
So you wonder, if Lazarus had told them anything, would they have believed it?
Right.
The interesting thing is this, is nobody that was resuscitated by Christ ever talked about what they saw on the other side. Yes. The son of the widow of Nain,
yes.
Jairus' daughter,
yes.
Lazarus, none of them. But today, and especially around Easter, you hear all of these people, I died. I was dead for 30 minutes and I resuscitated in the hospital morgue, and this is what I saw. You can't shut them up. I mean, they're got book deals and all this kind of stuff. They're on the television circuit, but it's interesting to me, none of these people ever say a word about what they saw on the other side.
Even Paul, when he talks about his vision of heaven, he doesn't give any details.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Today, well, I think there's providence behind that. And usually the books that are written about they saw heaven are more about them than they are about the glory of God.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I do want you mentioned Dr. Gregory in your time at First Dallas. You followed at First Baptist Dallas and at First Baptist Jacksonville. If I'm correct in my memory, you followed. You stepped into pulpits that had some really strong pastors and well loved, well beloved, and I think at both of those churches, Dr. Criswell was still living when you went to First Dallas, I believe.
Yes, I buried him.
Okay, and then that same thing at Jerry Vines was just retired, so he was still in the church at Jacksonville, I think, wasn't he?
Well, he had moved to Woodstock, Georgia.
Okay,
and was there. Now. Dr. Criswell was a great friend. I loved him. I loved that old man. I just loved him. He was so good and kind to me. And Dr. Vines and I are, at least I will say, he is a very dear friend of mine. He and I talk almost every day. We text every day.
So what I want to ask you about that is, every pastor preaches with their own personality and giftedness, and there's no surprise that you would be very different than Dr. Criswell, very different than Jerry Vines. How did you navigate in those particularly intense places? How did you navigate honoring the ministries of those that were before you while at the same time being honest about your own personality and giftedness in the pulpit?
Yeah. Well, when I went to see Dr. Criswell before I preached that Sunday at First Dallas when they called me, and he wanted me to come over and kneel by his chair. He was already, almost confined to the chair. He was walking a little. And I went over and I knelt down by him. He wanted to lay his hands on me and pray for me, but he looked at me first and he said, you just be wonderful, you. And I knew what he was saying. He was saying, don't try to be me. Don't try to be somebody else. Just be you. And that was extremely helpful. And that's exactly what he was telling me to be. You're not going to be me, and you can't be somebody else. Just be who you are. And I took that to heart, and that's what I did. I just tried to be who I was. And I figured if God called me here, he must have wanted me here for some reason. He knew that that in being me, it was what he wanted at the church at that time. So I tried to remain true to that. I tried not to get caught up in all of the headiness of the pulpit that I was in. I tried not to be intimidated by all the people that had preached in that pulpit, Truett and Billy Graham and, of course, W.A. Criswell and, all of the great guys that had gone before. O.S. Hawkins was there for, I think, 3.5 years before I got there. And, just you look back through history, all of the famous people that had preached in that place.
Yeah.
So I try not to let that intimidate me. And I just focused on the fact that, Lord, you allowed me to be here. I believe you called me here. And I'm here. I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't in your will. So help me to just be me and do what you've laid on my heart to do. Honoring them was no problem. To honor Dr. Criswell was no issue. It was easy to do. To honor Dr. Vines and even Dr. Lindsay, though he was dead by the time I got there, that was never difficult to do. That was not hard for me to do. And I think if you went to OS and if you went to Dr. Hawkins and you went to Dr. Vines, I think both of them would tell you that I was as good and as kind and as accommodating as I could possibly be. I had them both back to preach multiple times. Dr. Vines I had preach every year. Dr. Hawkins I had come back and preached numerous times. In fact, Dr. Hawkins' 2 daughters and their husbands came and rejoined the church when I got there. And I was their pastor until one was called to ministry, and he was called to another church, and of course his wife went with him, and then I was his other daughter's pastor until I left there. And the same with Dr. Vines. His daughter was there in the church, and his daughter-in-law. Dr. Lindsay's daughter-in-law. And his daughter, Nancy, was still there. So, to honor them, that was not an issue.
Did you ever feel pressure to diminish a portion of your personality or to preach in a certain way just because of who you were following?
Well, that is are you a psychiatrist? That's a really good probing question. I don't think I did, even though I knew I was not W.A. Criswell quality or Jerry Vines quality. It's like playing golf. They say that if you play golf with great players, your game goes up. Well, in following these guys, I think my game went up. I was not them. And I would never consider myself a better preacher than they were. But I do think that I was a good expositor, and I continued to feed their congregations.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that has fascinated me about you is that you have been a lifelong learner. So you got a D-Min back in the 90s, I think, and then I guess you just didn't have enough, and so you wanted to go back and do a PhD.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I'm assuming that means you enjoy academics, but being a lifelong learner, what do you enjoy about being a student, and what ministry training resources would you encourage a pastor to pursue, regardless of their access to things like seminary?
Well, today it is so easy to get additional education through Zoom. I mean, you're in the classroom just as if you were sitting there. They see you, you see them, they hear you, you hear them. So, that is just a marvel to me. But yes, I have always been curious and interested, and really my PhD was for me. It was just for me, in that I wanted to go back to school. I want to go back now. I've asked my wife, I said, listen, I would really love to do a degree in history at Cambridge University. And she just said, we're done with education. So, I imagine if I just fell on the floor crying and begging, she would say, okay, go ahead. But I want to go back and learn German. There are a lot of things I would love to do.
I did not see wanting to learn German coming.
Well, I would like to do that. I wouldn't mind going back and taking Latin.
Okay.
I've had so much Greek, and of course I had the Hebrew, but So anyway, let me get to the other part of your sermon, your question, I'm sorry, is resources. Resources are so critical. And to me, I do it the old way. I've got a library of about 12 or 13,000 books. So I've got a heavy library, and I just prefer a book to an iPad unless I'm on an airplane. And I've loaded down my iPad with thousands of dollars worth of books because I just am no longer able to tote 100 pounds of books around with me anymore. Right. So I use books. Young guys use logos or whatever, and that's fine. You've got to work with what does you best. But books are so important, and reading is so important, and getting good material is so critical. For example, my latest purchase was Robert Gundry's 2-volume work on the Gospel of Mark. It is unreal. I don't know why I've not known about that before now, because I think it came out in the late 1990s. But it is just beyond excellent. So I think resources are critical. They're very important for a guy. You need to build your library. And, if you actually get books, you're going to leave them to somebody. So it's something you can pass down. Yeah. And I understand books coming back, by the way. I understand that there is kind of a shift back to books. And by the way, since this is on preaching, I just got word today from Northeast Baptist College, Northeast Baptist Press, that they are going to publish my PhD dissertation on the 16th century Anabaptist hermeneutic as seen through the ministry of Balthasar Hubmaier. Now, it'll be under a different title. It will be The Origins of Baptist Preaching, the Anabaptist Connection. So that'll be out either this November, sometime between this November and April of next year. And I kind of look at the origins of our preaching. And I think a lot of it rests with the old Anabaptists.
That's a whole podcast in and of itself. But one of the things that has always fascinated me about those guys, most of them didn't live that long. And so, but
on the average, they lived 2 years after they became Anabaptists.
Right. And yet they produced in their life just so much great testimony and work. It makes me feel small when I think about what they did.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. So I go back to saying, a library is absolutely invaluable to a pastor if he's going to preach well. Yeah. I can walk into a guy's study and I can tell you within about 90 seconds about the level he's preaching.
So I love books, and I'm of the generation, I do both. So if I buy a book electronically, I'll buy the physical book too, because there's just something different about.
I do too.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was one crazy like that.
Well, but part of that is, I like the searchability of the electronic, but then if I'm going to write in a margin, you got to have a real book. Yeah. And there's just something about holding it and working it that way.
Oh, there is. There's just something about a book in your hand.
So this is not good academics. I'm just going to tell you what I did when I was at Southwestern. There are some books that every pastor has had in their library. And when you'd go to the library there at Southwestern, you'd find a shelf where there might be 20 copies of, a particular book.
Yes.
And I would go to those books and I would thumb through them and I'd find the book that came from like a pastor like you who wrote in their margins and highlighted. And that's the one I'd grab because it helped me quickly identify important places in the book. So I was enjoying their previous work to help me do some study.
Well, you know what that's called? That's called wisdom. You don't have to do it all yourself. Learn from somebody else. And that's wisdom.
So you need to have somebody at some place just mark all the spines of your book. So whenever you donate them and wherever they go, the learners after you can just grab those and get those highlighters.
Dr. Criswell left a Bible. that he had taken and he had written in the margin all these places where he found the best work on this verse.
Ooh.
And I mean, people wanted that thing like they wanted,
yes,
the jewels of the Nile.
yes.
And I think they got it at Criswell College. I think it wound up over there. But he had a key to the commentaries that had the best information about this verse. And he had taken the time to write all that into that Bible.
That's a gift. That is a treasure.
Yeah, it's a real treasure. It's a shame they don't take that and publish it.
Right. Yeah, because I'm guessing that type of a Bible like that's probably not even usable at the library. It's probably in their treasure
Oh no,
book
they
section.
got that thing they've got that thing behind lock and key. I can assure you.
Right. So one of the things I noticed about Valleydale that I was really encouraged by is you do I guess it's on Monday, a YouTube recap of your sermon. And I watched some of them, and they are, you talk about baseball and the weather and, all kinds of, general conversational things. But at some point, it's just a conversation about, going beyond the sermon. I love the idea of trying to help your church think beyond Sunday, go a little bit deeper, and it's very accessible. I mean, it's not heady, it's not academic. Was that your idea, or was that somebody on your staff that said, let's do YouTube?
I think it was Kirkwood's idea.
Okay.
I believe it was his. It was either his or it was Joanna's idea.
By the way, I'm a little jealous of Kirkwood's hair.
Yeah, really.
God bless you.
Me too. He and I are so. I went to Southwestern with his mom and dad. That's how young he is.
Right.
And he and I just he's kind of like my son. And so we just kind of hit it off, and we have chemistry. I think we do. And, and we are so different. I'm so this way and he's so that way. But he is one of the best staff members. I mean, he will look after me and take care of me. I just love him because of that. And he listens to me. But we get along just famously. And it's what you see on there is actually who we are. And we'll get off on anything in the world, Motown music, movies, this, that, but we'll wind back around to getting back to the text.
Yes.
And
well, I just appreciated you were talking, the one I watched, I think it was the most recent one. You were just giving some background on where you had gotten some stuff for your sermon and some of your struggle of how you wanted to organize the sermon. And
was it the one out of Mark 15?
Yes.
Yeah. Now see, I got a lot of that stuff out of Gundry.
Right.
In his gospel, in his commentary on the Gospel of Mark. But then I look, now this is an important thing for guys to know if you're studying. Go look at Gundry's resources. Where did Gundry get this from? And he takes you back to primary sources, which is what you want to begin with. And Lord, I found more stuff from his footnotes than I did in his text.
Mm. So I have coined a phrase for myself that I'm an aspirational reader because I'll interact with the text like that, and then I'll buy all the books in the that's been referenced. And you're talking about looking at my library. There are probably more books in my library that I need to read than I've actually read. I'm going to get to that one. I'm going to get to that one, and it used to bother me to have books that I hadn't finished. But I've just decided no. I'm going to buy them and hope to get to them.
Listen, I've got stacks beside my chair. I've got stacks beside another chair. I've got stacks on my desks. This is what I'm going to read. This is what I'm about to read. I've got several things right now that I can't believe I haven't read. I've got a book on a book on World War II that I have not read as of yet. No, it will involve Churchill. It's called Taking London. I've read Taking Paris and Taking Berlin. But there's a third one out called Taking London. I've got it, and I can't believe I haven't read it yet. And I've got one on the demons of unrest, on the beginning of the Civil War. And I cannot believe I haven't read that yet. So I've got stacks of stuff the same way.
So, but
I'm
you must
currently
be
reading.
a very fast reader.
No, I'm really not. I'm not as fast as I want to be. I'm reading right now Constantine at the Bridge. And then I've got another one on the battle that made Rome, which was between Caesar and Pompey. And I can't get through this thing on Constantine to get to the other one. And then I've got stacks of them too.
Yeah. They taunt me. I'm like, well, I got to get to that. And yeah.
I go through there and I just hear them chuckling at me, you know.
So then I just said, well, I'm aspirational. One of these days.
That's right.
Well, Dr. Brunson, you've been tremendously gracious with your time. I do want to just finish up with one question. And that is, if you could speak to yourself as young Mac Brunson getting started, maybe at pastoring that first church before seminary or your first church after, what would you encourage yourself? If you could speak to yourself back then, what would you encourage yourself to give more time to and effort to? And what would you warn yourself not to give any attention or concern to?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I would tell myself, you've got to do more serious reading. Number two, just graduating seminary, I'd say, be sure you keep your languages fresh, because if you don't work on it every day, you're going to lose it. My Hebrew is gone, but I do work on, I was reading Greek yesterday and this morning. I was, to keep that up. Don't let that go by. Those are two things. I would probably, if I could go back, journal things. I've not done any journaling, and I really kind of regret now that I did not do some of that. The real important thing is this, and my wife helped me with this more than anybody else, is that I can be everybody else's pastor, but I can only be one woman's husband and a couple of kids' dad. And that I do not need to let the church rob me of my family time. Now, generally, most guys today have gotten a lot better handle on that. But I think back to my daughter played softball in high school, and I saw one game. So when I left North Carolina and I went to Dallas, my wife looked at me and she said, now you got two boys playing football and two boys wrestling. She says, now you're not going to miss these. You're going to be there at them. And do you know what? I did not miss a single wrestling match or a single football game. Now, I had people come. For example, I had a guy come one time. He wanted me to go and talk to his grandson about Jesus Christ. And he said, now he's going to be home. It's Thursday night. He's going to be home tonight. I said, buddy, I can't go tonight. I've got to go see my son play football. And he looked at me and he just kind of scolded me. He said, you mean to tell me football is more important than witnessing to my grandson? I said, then you go tell him. You go share with him. I said, I can't go tonight, but I will see him before Sunday morning. And you know what? I went to that boy's house. I took both my sons with me when I did, and I led that boy to the Lord. So it's a long way to say, don't let anybody shame you from spending the time with your family that you should. I did that, and I regret it. Now, my wife nor my kids have ever brought that up to me, but I regret not giving them the time that I should have.
Yeah, because church ministry, if you let it, will consume everything you have. I mean, time-wise.
Everything you do, everything.
And that's not so much the church demand, it's just the nature of it. If you give to it, it'll take it.
It is. And if you have a pastor's heart, now not every preacher has a pastor's heart, but if you have a pastor's heart, you long to pastor your people.
Yeah.
Shepherd the people of God's flock.
Yeah. I've noticed.
So, and that's a hard thing to do, is just to say, well, I'm sorry, I can't get to the hospital to see Granny, who has already been there for 3 weeks and probably going to be there 3 more. I'll get there.
Right.
But I'm not going to beat the ambulance to the hospital.
Ministry needs are never convenient. I mean, they never happen at, Monday morning when you've got plenty of time.
Never. I often said if I could schedule all the emergencies between 2 and 5 on Thursday afternoons, I could handle all of them. But it doesn't fall that way.
No, and the larger church you are, just the more those demands are. I have noticed that my wife and I, so we are we're 2 years away from all of our children graduating from high school. And we've already started talking about, for us, the school events, all the sports events and those things have been a tremendous advantage for us to connect with people outside of the church.
Yeah. And, they are.
But when
really are.
When they graduate from high school, we're going to have to develop new skill sets and techniques because we'll lose that, those connections.
Well, I'm going now, and this past fall, we were going 3 nights a week. I was watching one boy play football in one place, another boy play football in another place, and a granddaughter playing volleyball. And now you have to pay to get in all those things. And I looked at Debbie at the end of the way. I said, Debbie, you realize we've spent right at $100 going to these games this week?
Yes.
Well, that's, we're just going to have to do it.
Debbie doesn't care. She's going to spend the money, isn't she?
No, yeah, we're going to be there.
Yeah.
You're going to be there. So we don't have this little bit of time. We're going to be there. I said, okay. I said, when you're starving in your old age and I can't feed you,
that's
just
good
remember,
money spent.
You saw a good football game. Oh, gosh.
Well, Dr. Brunson, you have been so gracious with your time, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation today about preaching with you.
Well, Ben, I've enjoyed talking to you too, bud.
It's been a blessing, and your ministry has been a blessing, and I know, you've had a much broader ministry even beyond your local churches, and so I want to say I appreciate that about you. And one of the things that I have always appreciated is when you have a platform like you do, there are some who I do mean this negatively. They become platform personalities. But I appreciate the fact that you have had a pastor's heart and have pastored churches, and that's been primary in your life, and that you beyond that you get to do some things that are at platforms and speaking events and those sort of things. But I've noticed that through the years you've stayed true to that pastor's work of preaching to your congregation and leading them well.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. I feel that that's my call, and I love it. I would do it for free. You have to pay me to go to meetings. That's what they pay me for. They pay me to go to meetings. They don't pay me to preach. They don't pay me to pastor folks. But they do have to pay me to go to meetings.
Yes, I do. I totally understand. Amen. Well, Dr. Brunson, thank you again for your time today.
Sure. Thank you. God bless you, bud.
God bless you. Thank you for listening to View from the Pulpit. For more information, go to my website at bensmithsenior.org. That's bensmithsr.org. You can follow me on X at x.com/Ben Smith SR. I look forward to meeting you next week for another conversation on View from the Pulpit.